Hi folks, hope you're okay today. It's good to be with you. We're looking at the call to the ministry, and David Wilkinson says, as I look back over 50 years of ministry, I recall innumerable tests, trials and times of crushing pain, but through it all the Lord has proven faithful, loving and totally true to all his promises. David Wilkinson. God has called you, he will be with you in ministry. Hi folks, hope you're okay today. We're looking at the call to the ministry, and Henry Nouwen said, ministry is the least important thing. You cannot minister if you are in communion with God and live in community. So you need to be in communion with God, you need to be in ministry if you're going to be able to do you need to be in communion with God and in community in order to minister. Otherwise ministry is irrelevant unless you're in communion with God and in community. Hi folks, we're looking at the call to the ministry, and we're looking at John Piper. He says it's amazing how many introverts go into the ministry. It's amazing how many people go into the ministry who don't really like to be with people. Now there's a thought. If you don't like people, don't go into ministry. Hi folks, hope you're okay today. We're looking at ministry, and Max Lucado says, initially when I first became a Christian and got into ministry, my thought was that God existed to make my life better and to take me to heaven. Now I've realized that it's not about me at all. It's all about God, and that he did this to display his plan to restore the earth to the Garden of Eden estate. Often in ministry we think it's all about ourselves, but it's not. It's about God's glory and others. Hi folks, hope you're okay today. We're looking at George Muller on ministry. He says, may those who enjoy the faithful ministry of the word feel exceedingly thankful for it. There are few blessings on earth greater for a believer, and yet the Lord is frequently obliged to teach us the value of this blessing by depriving us of it for a season. If God has given you the ministry of preaching the word, see it as a privilege and be careful not to take it for granted. Hi folks, we're looking at call to ministry and what's it all about. John Wycliffe, one of the great reformers, says, in order to the existence of such a ministry in the church, there are requisite an authority received from God, and consequently power and knowledge imparted from God for the exercise of such ministry. And when a man possesses these, although the bishop has not laid hands upon him, according to his traditions, God has himself appointed him. So if you've got the gifts and the wisdom and the knowledge, then chances are God's already ordained you if you're already using the gift of preaching and encouraging people and ministering to people. And maybe if people are not recognizing above you the hierarchy, the bishops or whatever, then maybe that's a problem with them than actually with you, because God's put his seal of approval on your ministry. They should be recognizing that. Hi folks, we're looking at a call to ministry. John Chrysostom says, I know my own soul, how feeble and puny it is. I know the magnitude of this ministry and the great difficulty of the work, for more stormy billows vex the soul with the priest than the gales which disturb the sea. Don't go into your call confident and cocky of yourself. Go into the call confident of God. Don't go into the call fearing the problems. There will be problems. Don't go into the call thinking there'll be no problems, because there will be problems. Go into the call with your eyes wide open. It will be tough, but God is with you. Hi folks, we're looking at the call, and we're looking at two quotes from Kevin De Young. He says, as a pastor in a Protestant church, my whole ministry centers on the conviction that by grace we are saved through faith. But it's not our faith that delivers us, as in believing something, anything at all, were pleasing to God. It's the object of our faith, Christ's life, death and resurrection, that saves us. He says, just very practically, pastors need to be careful that while they have a right to call people to absolute allegiance to the Word of God, we don't have a right to call the people to absolute allegiance to our programs or every ministry we have at the church. Very wise. Hi folks, hope you're okay today. Looking at ministry. Henry Nouwen says, there's too many of us are lonely ministers practicing a lonely ministry. Well, when you think of the early church and the apostles, they were always working with people. The Lord had people around him, and John the Baptist was on his own, but I think he did have disciples. But you know, if we can, we need to be working with people. Okay. Right, folks, our last quote on ministry is by Charles Hodge. He says this: "Our first remark on this subject is that the ministry is an office and not merely a work." What that means is we're not just doing it to get a pay packet at the end of the day. We're doing it because we're devoted to the people, we're devoted to God's cause, and we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for the cause of God. So it's a sacrament rather than a work. Thank you for listening.